Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a truly extraordinary case study from a fascinating esoteric text. We're stepping into a wild, sweeping narrative, one that literally blends ancient cosmology, genetic manipulation, historical folklore, and, believe it or not, modern-day surveillance. Whether you approach this as profound spiritual history or just a compelling piece of sci-fi lore, you've got to admit the structure of this story is incredibly detailed and it spans eons of time.
The source material we're looking at today is a book called Soul Readings of Space People. According to this text, certain individuals actually possess a continuous consciousness. We're talking about a soul memory that spans across completely different lifetimes and even different planets. So today, we're tracking the soul reading of an individual known simply as Subject A, uncovering a hidden cosmic history that kind of flips what we know about human origins right on its head.
To make sense of this expansive timeline, we're going to structure this explainer chronologically. Section 1 covers Venusian origins. Section 2 is the UFO abduction. Section 3 brings us to the Edo period Tengu boy. And Section 4 wraps up with present-day surveillance.
Okay, Section 1, Venusian origins of Subject A.
Let's start at the absolute beginning of this soul's journey. According to the text, Subject A's story didn't start anywhere near Earth. Nope, it began eons ago on the harsh, unforgiving surface of Venus. The text describes an environment of just unimaginably high temperatures and vast, swirling acidic oceans. Obviously, that is a hostile, terrifying environment for us humans, but consider Subject A's original biological form. Their soul memory reveals they were this massive, 3-meter-tall amphibian entity. Picture something closely resembling a giant warty toad. They had this incredibly thick, tough skin, which was actually a highly evolved biological necessity just to withstand the extreme heat in those corrosive Venusian waters.
Moving on to Section 2, UFO abduction and genetic adaptation.
Now, what makes this narrative so fascinating is the sudden, quite violent transition. Subject A doesn't just peacefully pack up and migrate from Venus to Earth. Instead, the soul reading outlines a very precise, multi-step intervention. Step 1 is a forcible abduction by a UFO. Then, Step 2 introduces a rigorous laboratory process where Subject A's biology is subjected to advanced cloning experiments. And Step 3 shows us the ultimate goal of all this, which is selective breeding. Basically, the extraterrestrials operating this UFO were actively, intentionally mutating Subject A's Venusian biology. The goal was to force an adaptation to Earth's completely different atmosphere and gravity. It's almost like a giant cosmic science experiment.
Which leads us to Section 3. The Edo period Tengu boy.
This brings us to what's really the narrative climax of the text. Just look at how vast this timeline is. We start eons ago on Venus. Then we move into this totally indeterminate amount of time spent inside a UFO laboratory, undergoing all those genetic changes. And finally, we arrive at the drop-off. The culmination of these forced experiments resulted in Subject A being deposited right here on Earth, specifically in Japan, right in the middle of the Edo period, so we're talking anywhere from the early 17th to the late 19th century. This is where the source just brilliantly connects these overarching sci-fi concepts to localized human history. You see, despite the selective breeding, Subject A still retained some lingering alien traits. Now, when the local Japanese populace encountered this being, they obviously didn't have the vocabulary for extraterrestrial. They didn't know what an alien was. Instead, they relied on their own cultural framework. So they historically recorded Subject A as a Tengu, a legendary creature from Japanese folklore known for its unusual, non-human physical characteristics. According to this text, the famous Tengu boy of historical record was actually our highly adapted Venusian. Crazy, right? Finally, we reach Section 4. Present-day alien surveillance. Because, as you might have guessed, the story doesn't end in the Edo period. The text claims this cosmic experiment actually has some really eerie, lingering consequences that stretch right into our modern era. Today, Subject A exists in a modern human body, but they aren't entirely free. The text says advanced monitoring devices are purportedly still implanted within their physical form. And the purposes for these implants are super comprehensive: physiological tracking, location monitoring, and ongoing behavioral observation. Meaning those exact same extraterrestrial observers who conducted the UFO cloning experiments eons ago, they're actively gathering data on Subject A right now. As we wrap up this explainer and conclude our journey through the bizarre, expansive lore of Subject A's soul reading, it really leaves us with a provocative thought to ponder. If we take the premise of this esoteric text seriously, that unseen observation and ancient genetic histories are hiding right beneath the surface of seemingly normal people,
it begs a pretty massive question. If Subject A is currently walking around with a hidden cosmic history and active monitoring implants, well, who else might be? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes open.
All right, let's just dive right into an incredibly specific and honestly fascinating piece of extraterrestrial world building from Ryuho Okawa. We're looking at an explainer of the book Soul Readings of Space People. And today, well, we are unpacking a section entirely focused on a very unique entity, the Martian chicken. Yep, you heard that right. We're going to examine the taxonomy, the psychology, and the historical impact of an egg-laying, highly intelligent soul from Mars.
So, Chapter 2 of this text presents a really bizarre and captivating look at the cosmic origins of human souls. It poses a pretty provocative question right out of the gate. Are you really an Earthling? Specifically, zooming in on what the text describes as a Martian with a god of war role. The book refers to them as Subject B. So let's explore this incredibly fascinating lore.
This brings us to the core premise of Subject B's soul reading. What if Japan's legendary Tengu are actually alien chickens from Mars? I mean, it's a wild concept, right? A lot of us know the Tengu from Japanese folklore, those formidable, long-nosed mountain goblins. But this text is proposing that these mythical figures are actually earthly incarnations of a very specific alien soul.
Part 1. The Martian chicken form. Biological and spiritual taxonomy.
Now, the text lays out a precise breakdown of this entity, and it's absolutely crucial we don't get the step numbers wrong here. Step 1 is their Martian origin. They come from the red planet. Step 2 is their distinct chicken-like avian form. Step 3, they are oviparous, meaning they reproduce by laying eggs. And Step 4, tying the whole shebang together, they possess a vastly superior, highly intelligent nature.
So the real takeaway here is that despite the unusual avian exterior, we're dealing with a being of immense intellect. You know, you hear chicken-like and egg-laying, and you might immediately picture a simple farm animal clucking around. But the source really wants us to understand that this physical form is just a biological vessel for an incredibly sharp, strategic, and aware consciousness.
Moving on to Part 2, the roots of the Tengu, earthly manifestations.
The source explicitly claims that these egg-laying Martians are literally the original basis for the legendary Tengu here on Earth. Think about the traditional imagery for a second. The wings, the beak-like faces, that deep connection to the sky. According to Chapter 2, when these Martian souls actually incarnate here, their spiritual DNA manifests in these bird-like characteristics, eventually becoming the famous goblins of legend.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast of their existence. Over on one side, you've got their extraterrestrial biology, chicken-like, oviparous, Martian. In isolation, that almost sounds mundane, doesn't it? But then consider their earthly roles. They don't just become passive creatures pecking at the dirt. They become Tengu, gods of war, and historically massive warlords. The alien form is really just a shell for a spirit that is absolutely destined for combat and leadership.
Let's dive into Part 3, Pride, War, and Warlords, a psychological breakdown.
The text outlines 3 fundamental driving forces behind these beings. They have an immense sense of pride, fierce competitiveness, and a historically belligerent demeanor. That strong sense of pride basically ensures they naturally command authority wherever they go. The intense competitiveness means they literally never settle for a loss. And that belligerent nature, well, that implies an innate, almost hardwired readiness for conflict. These aren't just learned traits. The author is saying they are inescapable characteristics of the Martian soul itself. Now, because of their literal, bird-like origins, they also possess a broad, strategic perspective. The source uniquely calls this a bird's-eye view. This is exactly where the physical form perfectly meets the psychological function. Think about it. A chicken or a bird-like entity naturally views the world from above, taking in the whole grand picture rather than getting bogged down in the tiny details on the ground. The author suggests this physical trait translates into a huge cognitive advantage for these souls.
This wide-angle vision of the battlefield positions them perfectly to assume roles as warlords. When you take that intense Martian pride and combine it with this bird's-eye strategic intelligence, you've basically got the perfect recipe for a military tactician. They can see the flow of battle, anticipate enemy movements, and command from a position of absolute oversight. It's pretty wild, but the text suggests that many of the great tacticians of our past were actually drawing on this deep extraterrestrial intuition. This direct cause and effect shows how alien biology fundamentally dictates earthly dominance. Their avian mindset, that inherent need to look down from above and survey the entire landscape, directly translates into their destiny as warlords. They assume these commanding roles because their Martian, bird-like souls are quite literally built for oversight, high-level strategy, and ultimately conflict.
So, we're going to leave you with this provocative thought from the source material. Think about the great conflicts of history for a second. The text really challenges us to look beyond standard human motivations and consider, was Earth's history actually shaped by the pride of an alien chicken? Whether you view this as literal truth, a spiritual metaphor, or just a fascinating piece of sci-fi world-building, the logic used to connect a Martian entity to a Japanese god of war is undeniably captivating. Keep questioning the origins of the stories we tell, because you never know what you might find.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a fascinating mystery today, the mystery of Subject C and the lunar base. So, picture this. We're looking at a case study drawn from some really intriguing esoteric source material, focusing on an individual known only to us as Subject C. Now, Subject C has this incredibly intense, almost paralyzing discomfort with being observed by other people. I mean, we've all felt a little awkward when someone stares at us, right? But for Subject C, this isn't just your run-of-the-mill social anxiety. It's a profound, deep-seated mystery. And to unravel it, the source text we're unpacking today doesn't dig into their childhood. No, it looks quite literally up into the stars. So I really want you to think about this. Why exactly does Subject C hate being watched with such intense, visceral emotion? You know, normally when we see extreme quirks like this, unexplained aversions, deep phobias, things like that, we automatically turn to conventional psychology, right? We look for completely earthly explanations. But the material we're breaking down today takes a radically different approach. It actually suggests that to understand this extreme aversion, we have to look at a highly esoteric, cosmic explanation. It's a pretty wild ride, and honestly, it completely reframes how we might think about human behavior. The source text uses this wonderfully evocative phrase to describe exactly what Subject C is feeling. It calls it an alien-like sense of privacy and extreme caution. Think about that for a second. It's not just regular earthly panic. It implies this fundamental feeling of simply not belonging here. It's a deeply ingrained, almost instinctual need to stay completely hidden from the gaze of the people of this world. It's extreme self-preservation, and the text argues that this actually stems from a soul that feels entirely foreign to its current environment. So yeah, this is way beyond just being a little introverted. It's a deep, cosmic caution.
Okay, let's dive into this. The source material we're looking at claims to uncover the hidden, interstellar memories of human souls. And when it comes to Subject C, the explanation for their extreme privacy points straight to an otherworldly account involving secrets hidden on the far side of the moon. According to this text, the moon is definitely not just some dead rock orbiting Earth. It supposedly holds a functioning, hidden base where some truly unbelievable interactions have taken place. And it's this very specific lunar connection that allegedly holds the key to Subject C's entire psychological puzzle.
The account lays out this remarkable three-step journey. First, we start with Subject C's ordinary earthly life, just, going about their business. But then, things take a massive, dramatic turn. Step 2 details Subject C actually being taken by a UFO. Now, interestingly, this isn't described as some terrifying abduction scenario, but more like a journey with a very specific intended destination. And that brings us to Step 3, arrival at a hidden base on the far side of the moon. The text presents this as both a physical and a spiritual voyage, a profound dislocation from Earth that sets the stage for some incredibly significant cosmic meetings.
Section title, 3 Distinct Alien Encounters.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredible contrast in the beings described. At this lunar base, Subject C reportedly conversed with 3 completely distinct extraterrestrial entities. First, an entity with a goat-like face. Second, a beautiful blonde woman who the source suggests is likely Pleiadian in origin. And third, an alien with a baboon-like face. The source material just neutrally details these highly specific entities, which really challenges that standard homogenized pop culture image we all have of what an alien is supposed to look like. So you have this huge visual contrast happening here. On one hand, you've got the described human-like beauty of the blonde Pleiadian. That's a form that feels familiar, maybe even a little comforting to a human observer, right? But then, on the exact opposite hand, you have the startlingly animalistic features of the goat and baboon-faced aliens. According to the source, Subject C had to sit there, process, and interact with all of these wildly differing aesthetics all at once at the lunar base. The text uses this juxtaposition to emphasize the vast, almost incomprehensible diversity of life that supposedly exists out there.
Section title: Subject C's Future Mission.
So, the crucial point is understanding the actual purpose of this whole experience. Subject C's soul, according to the text, carries a very grounded, specific cosmic duty. Their mission is to introduce the existence and the incredibly diverse appearance of these beings to humanity, and they're meant to do this through visual media, specifically photography or filmmaking. Basically, Subject C is tasked with making the unseen seen. They have to use the tools of earthly media to slowly acclimate the rest of humanity to the reality of beings just like the ones they interacted with on the moon base. They have to use the tools of earthly media to slowly acclimate the rest of humanity to the reality of beings just like the ones they interacted with on the moon base. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how this all connects back to the mystery we started with. Let's connect the dots here. Subject C has this intense, alien-like sense of privacy, absolutely hates being watched. But they also have this massive cosmic mission to visually introduce aliens to the world. So how on earth do you reconcile those two things? Well, by operating behind the camera. Think about it. As a photographer or filmmaker, you are the observer. You are inherently not the observed. The camera acts as a perfect shield. It allows Subject C to safely execute their soul's mission of visual disclosure, all while perfectly maintaining that deep-seated protective caution. Their biggest psychological quirk is literally the exact mechanism that lets them fulfill their cosmic duty. It's like a giant puzzle coming completely together.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely fascinating question to ponder. Could our deepest psychological quirks actually have origins beyond this world? Look, whether you view this source material as literal truth or just as a really profound metaphorical framework, it definitely forces us to ask some incredible questions about ourselves. Next time you notice a seemingly inexplicable quirk in yourself, or maybe someone you know, like an intense aversion or a strange talent, consider the story of Subject C. What if the very things that make us the most unusual are actually clues to a much larger, maybe even cosmic story? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you something completely new to think about today. Keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome to today's explainer, where we're jumping straight into Chapter 4 of our source material. And honestly, this chapter is a wild ride. We are diving into some deep, esoteric cosmic lore, centering around a mysterious figure known simply as Subject D. It's a fascinating narrative that weaves together cosmic history, major earthly events, and a massive spiritual mission.
I mean, just think about that premise for a second. What if an alien soul reincarnated on Earth specifically to save humanity from itself? It is a totally captivating concept, right? And to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to follow the chronological journey of Subject D's soul. We're literally tracking it from the vastness of the cosmos all the way down into a hidden underground facility right here on Earth.
Now, just to be clear, everything we're exploring today comes directly from these specific spiritual readings, a collection of esoteric texts often referred to as soul readings of space people. We aren't here to take sides or tell you what to believe. We're just going to neutrally map out this complex narrative so we can actually grasp the exact claims being made by the source material. We'll be breaking down the origins, the motivations, and the actions of Subject D.
Let's start with Section 1, Origins of the Clarion Soul. So to make sense of Subject D's life here on Earth, we actually have to look up, way up. According to the text, Subject D isn't a standard human soul at all, but rather possesses the soul of a Clarion. And who are the Clarions? They're described as an extraterrestrial group with deep ancestral roots in the Pleiades star cluster. But what really defines them isn't where they're from, it's who they are. They are fundamentally characterized by these incredibly strong hearts of love and a profound, deep sense of harmony. That right there is the baseline for Subject D's entire identity.
Moving on to Section 2, A Culture of Divine Love.
It is absolutely fascinating to contrast Clarion culture with our own. Think about our standard earthly traits. We've got normal physical bodies and, standard human morality with all its everyday flaws and complexities. But the Clarions? The source material claims their actual physical bodies, and get this, even their clothing, literally emit light. They glow. And spiritually, the text explicitly states their values align deeply with Christian teachings, specifically a massive affinity for the concepts of profound love and sacrifice. They are basically presented as beings of pure, radiant altruism. Which brings us to Section 3, the atomic bomb catalyst. Okay, so if you are a being of profound, glowing harmony, why on earth would you come down to our chaotic planet? Well, tracking the timeline, step 1 is obviously their origin in the Pleiades, but step 2 is the ultimate turning point. The readings say that in 1945, Subject D's soul observed the catastrophic atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Witnessing that unprecedented, horrific level of earthly destruction was the exact catalyst for everything that followed. Because seeing that devastation didn't just make them sad, it sparked something way deeper: righteous indignation. That specific, intense emotional reaction to humanity's capacity for total self-destruction is what prompted their deliberate choice to reincarnate onto the earthly plane. This wasn't an accident. They consciously chose to come here on a mission.
Next up, Section 4, the underground UFO base.
Now we get into Subject D's physical life once they actually reincarnated on Earth. And this is where the logistical claims get truly extraordinary. The text details that ever since childhood, Subject D has supposedly been taken to a hidden underground UFO base, right here on Earth. It describes this seamless blending of a normal earthly existence with cosmic origins. They didn't hit the reset button on their memory either. They retained deep access to their past life memories as a Clarion.
It's essentially a process of cosmic engineering. First, Subject D accesses those retained past life Clarion memories. Second, they extract the highly advanced extraterrestrial knowledge that's basically embedded in those memories. And third, and this is just wild, they practically apply that knowledge to actively assist in the design and construction of UFOs at this underground facility. They're acting as a sort of cosmic consultant, bridging Pleiadian technology with earthly engineering.
Finally, Section 5, a mission to save humanity. So we have these glowing, peaceful souls, the sheer tragedy of atomic warfare, and secret underground engineering bases. What's the endgame? Well, the ultimate takeaway from Chapter 4 is that Subject D's presence here isn't an invasion. It's a rescue mission. The source posits that this reincarnation is driven entirely by profound, deep love. The goal is quite literally to save humanity from its own destructive tendencies, the exact same tendencies they witnessed back in 1945. Within this esoteric framework, the underground bases and the UFO designs are just tools to facilitate this grand mission of earthly salvation.
And that leaves us with one incredibly critical question. Will humanity actually embrace the clarion message of harmony and sacrifice before it's too late? Regardless of where you stand on the reality of extraterrestrial reincarnation, this source material offers a genuinely fascinating esoteric framework. It really challenges us to look in the mirror at our own capacity for destruction and asks if our world is genuinely ready for a message of pure cosmic harmony. It's definitely a compelling thought to chew on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the fascinating narratives that shape our world.
Welcome to today's explainer. We are jumping right into things because today we are unpacking some incredibly specific, deeply fascinating, and truly out-of-this-world esoteric lore. Seriously, we're going to explore a narrative that bridges the massive gap between deep space and ancient human history.
So think about this for a second. Who actually taught astronomy, monumental architecture, and the super complex science of flood control to ancient Egypt? Now, traditional history gives us an answer built on centuries of human trial and error. But the material we're digging into today, it offers a totally unconventional, extraterrestrial perspective.
The source text we're drawing from is a book titled Soul Readings of Space People by Ryuho Okawa. Now, right off the bat, I want to be absolutely clear. We aren't here to validate or debunk these claims. We are simply neutrally reporting on the text's incredibly unique narrative. Think of it as a really fascinating thought experiment, letting us understand exactly what this text claims about alien involvement in our distant past.
Section 1, The Soul from Scorpio.
Okay, let's dive into this. Chapter 5 of our source material centers completely on an entity called Subject E, who allegedly carries the soul of an alien from the Scorpio constellation. And the text gets super specific about their physical traits. While Subject E looked mostly human, there were some major differences. You and I have 5 digits, right? Well, Subject E had 6 fingers and 6 toes. But honestly, the most shocking difference is the height.
2.5 meters. That is literally over 8 feet tall. I really want to emphasize the sheer physical scale of Subject E here. Just imagine a being of that massive stature walking right alongside early humans. It's an absolutely crucial detail in the text, painting this entity as a towering, imposing figure to the ancient people they interacted with.
Section 2. Arrival in Ancient Egypt.
So how exactly did this towering figure get here? Well, according to the text, Subject E originated way out in the Scorpio constellation, traveled across the cosmos, and landed in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago. But here's the catch. They didn't arrive to conquer. Instead, they deeply integrated into the society, actually serving as a high priest during the mythological eras of Osiris and Horus. And here is a detail you're gonna love, this spacecraft itself. The text states they arrived in a pyramid-shaped spaceship. How crazy is that? It's captivating because it deliberately links advanced alien technology to what is basically the most iconic human architecture in existence. The implication here is that the Egyptian pyramids weren't just a human invention, but actually a reflection of the very vessel that fell from the stars.
Section 3. Guardians of Civilization.
Once they were established as a high priest, Subject E didn't just sit back and watch humanity figure things out. The text claims they actively taught 3 foundational technologies. Step 1 was astronomy, to unlock the secrets of the stars and seasons. Step 2 was architecture, which allowed for that monumental construction. And Step 3 was flood control, which was absolutely vital for harnessing the wild power of the Nile River. You know, these aren't just random facts. These are literally the essential building blocks you need to turn a scattered population into a powerful empire. Because of those massive contributions, the text explicitly refers to Subject E as a guardian of civilization. I really want to highlight that specific phrasing because it shows how Subject E viewed their own self-appointed protective role over early human history. They were essentially acting as a steward, actively nurturing humanity's growth.
Section 4. The role of virtue.
And this brilliantly illustrates a fascinating shift in the text. It moves right out of the sci-fi lore of spaceships and six-fingered giants and dives straight into deep political philosophy. Subject E actually believed in a strong hierarchical system, favoring a top-down rule by what they called noble kings. But hold on, this wasn't some tyrannical dictatorship. The entire structure balanced on one absolutely vital core requirement: high moral virtue.
This is the crucial takeaway here. Yes, Subject E favored strict top-down rule, but the text firmly insists this whole system hinges entirely on the leader's unshakable morality. Moral virtue is the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite. In the eyes of this Scorpio soul, without extreme ethical purity, there is simply no way a leader gets to sit at the top of that hierarchy. So, bringing our explainer full circle, Chapter 5 of this text really is a wild blend of ideas. It weaves together highly specific descriptions of a towering alien visitor with this surprisingly high-minded governance theory. It's an esoteric narrative that starts out in the distant stars of Scorpio, lands in the sands of ancient Egypt, and ends up reading like a philosophical treatise on how human societies actually ought to be ethically ruled.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If modern leaders were chosen strictly by their moral virtue, that absolute non-negotiable standard demanded by this alleged Scorpio soul thousands of years ago, how different would our world look today? It is for sure a question worth asking. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found this dive as incredibly fascinating as I did. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are doing a really deep dive into some absolutely fascinating and honestly pretty mysterious extraterrestrial claims. If you've ever looked up at the night sky and wondered about our deep cosmic connections, you're definitely going to want to stick around for this one. We're breaking down a very specific chapter from a highly provocative text, and we're going to take it step by step.
Okay, let's dive into this. What if, and just go with me here for a second, what if your neighbor's soul is actually from another star system? It's a wild thought experiment, right? But for the author of the text we're analyzing today, this isn't science fiction at all. It's presented as a hidden reality playing out right here on Earth, literally right next door. The source material we're digging into today is Ryuho Okawa's book, translated as Soul Readings of Space People, and it comes right out of the gate with a very direct subtitle: Are You Really an Earthling? For today's explainer, we are focusing entirely on Chapter 6. We're just going to neutrally lay out the specific claims the author is making, no taking sides here, just exploring this really fascinating narrative and what it implies about the nature of reality.
Section 1. The Case of Subject F, an Unsolved Mystery. So, this entire chapter reads a lot like an intriguing, unsolved case study. The author skips the broad, sweeping generalizations and zooms way in on just one specific person. To keep her identity under wraps, or maybe just to add to the whole mystique of it all, she's referred to in the text simply as Subject F. And according to Okawa's soul readings, Subject F is definitely not your average person passing you on the street. The book claims she actually harbors this incredibly unique cosmic background, one that completely flips how we're supposed to understand her life here on Earth. To back up that cosmic background, the source points to some seriously dramatic earthly evidence. According to the text, Subject F has intense psychic abilities that fall into two main buckets. First, unexplained materialization phenomena, which is basically the sudden physical appearance of objects out of thin air. And second, intense poltergeist activity. We're reporting exactly what the book claims here, treating these abilities as the foundational data points the author uses to prove her true identity. To really bring that abstract idea of materialization to life, the text gives us this highly specific, honestly kind of visceral anecdote. Subject F is claimed to have the ability to materialize stones directly from her feet. Yeah, stones. From her feet. It's a super unusual and jarring detail, but it's exactly this kind of bizarre physical manifestation that the author uses to argue that something completely otherworldly is happening. It's not just a vibe. According to the reading, it is a physical anomaly that demands an explanation.
Section 2, Origins. Essassani, the planet near Sirius.
So let's move to the next piece of the puzzle and see how this builds, because it really forces us to ask, where do these incredible powers actually come from? If we're following the premise of the text that these manifestations are real, the source is adamant that they are not human anomalies. They are imported. The soul reading claims to trace the origin of these powers far, far away from Earth.
And that brings us to Essassani. According to Okawa's text, Essassani is a distant planet located somewhere near the star Sirius. The reading makes this massive claim. Subject F does not possess a human soul. Instead, she literally has the soul of an alien originating from this specific planet. So her bizarre powers, in this context, they're just her true extraterrestrial nature operating inside a human vessel.
Now, if you happen to follow New Age or esoteric literature, the author drops a really fascinating contextual clue right here. The well-known channeled entity known as Bashar is also said to hail from this exact same planet, Essassani. By tying Subject F to a recognized name in esoteric circles, the source is basically placing her local, bizarre phenomena into a much broader, established cosmic framework.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the story we're unpacking. Check this out. In a past life, the reading claims Subject F served as a high-ranking priestess on Essassani. She wasn't just a regular citizen, she held profound spiritual authority. But in her current life, the text states this is her very first reincarnation on planet Earth, ever. So she is effectively a cosmic newcomer, a high priestess trying to navigate a completely foreign, dense, earthly environment for the very first time.
Section 3. The Spiritual Mission, a Cosmic Directive.
So if an alien high priestess from near Sirius is walking around on Earth, experiencing her first human incarnation and dropping stones from her feet, why? What is the actual purpose of this incredibly elaborate setup? Well, the book outlines a very deliberate sequence, a true earthly directive. Step 1, manifest undeniable psychic powers. All that poltergeist activity? Not random. Step 2, use these manifestations to definitively prove the existence of the spiritual world and ultimately God. And step 3, by proving the spiritual world is real, awaken a sense of religious faith in humanity. According to the source, her bizarre earthly powers are actually a highly calculated tool designed for mass spiritual awakening.
So the crucial point is really perfectly summarized in this quote from the source material. Her mission is to use her psychic powers to prove the existence of the spiritual world and God, thereby awakening a sense of religious faith in humanity. This entirely reframes Subject F. She isn't just a random curiosity or a haunted person, she's a deliberate cosmic missionary. Her psychic disruptions are basically her way of getting our attention so we look beyond our mundane physical world.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on as we wrap up today. If psychic phenomena are actually cosmic tools for spiritual awakening, what does that mean for the boundaries of our own reality?
Regardless of how you personally feel about extraterrestrial souls or psychic stones, the source material forces us to ask how we interpret the unexplained things in our lives. Are anomalies just glitches, or could they be intentional messages from a much wider universe? It is an absolutely fascinating framework to consider. Thank you guys for joining me on this deep dive into Chapter 6. Keep questioning, keep looking at the facts in front of you, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.